A hand shakes salt onto food. Ordinary. Forgettable. The kind of thing you do without thinking twice. Now picture this instead. A line of 10,000 camels, stretching to the horizon, crossing the harshest desert on earth. Not carrying gold. Not carrying jewels. Carrying salt. Because for over 1,000 years, in the heart of the Sahara, salt was traded slab for slab with gold. Empires rose because of this white crystal. Empires fell because of it too. Attacks on it helped spark a revolution in France. A ban on it helped end an empire in India. So here's the question worth asking. How did something sitting in a shaker on your kitchen table become one of the most fought-over substances in human history? Let's find out. Here's something strange about your body. It cannot make salt. Not a single grain. Every other mineral you need, your body can store, recycle, or manufacture in small amounts. Sodium isn't one of them. You need it for your nerves to fire, for your muscles to contract, for your blood to hold the right volume of fluid. Take away salt entirely, and within days your body starts to shut down. For most of human history, that single biological fact turned a common mineral into one of the most valuable resources on the planet. Whoever controlled salt didn't just control a seasoning. They controlled something every single person, in every single kingdom, could not live without. Over the next few minutes, we're going to trace that power across 8,000 years. From Stone Age families boiling brine over open fires, to a Chinese emperor who taxed his way to funding the Great Wall, to a barefoot man walking 240 miles to the sea to break an empire with nothing but his own 2 hands. This is the story of salt. Long before anyone wrote anything down, early humans were already following animals to natural salt licks, mineral-rich ground where deer and cattle instinctively gathered. If the animals needed it, so did the people hunting them. But the real turning point came later, when humans stopped simply finding salt and started making it. Around 6000 BCE, in what's now Pravadia, Romania, archaeologists uncovered the oldest known salt production site in the world, a facility nicknamed Salnitsata, where people boiled salty brine in clay pots over fire until only crystallized salt remained. It's one of the earliest examples of humans engineering a resource, rather than just gathering it. A few thousand years later, in the mountains of Hallstatt, Austria, communities began carving directly into salt-rich rock. What they started around 1300 BCE never really stopped. Hallstatt has been mined for salt for over 3,000 years, making it one of the oldest continuously worked resources on the planet. Wherever humans found salt, they built around it. And it wasn't long before someone realized, if people can't live without this, why not control it? In 119 BCE, the Han Dynasty Emperor Wu made a decision that would reshape Chinese history. He declared salt production a state monopoly. Overnight, making your own salt became illegal. Every grain now had to pass through the government first. The results were staggering. At its height, the salt monopoly generated up to 85% of the entire imperial revenue of China. 85% from one mineral. That money didn't just sit in a treasury. It helped fund standing armies, a canal system, and stretches of the Great Wall itself. It was a strategy so effective, later dynasties kept using it for 2,000 years. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Rome had its own relationship with salt. Soldiers received something called a salarium, a word you'll recognize, because it's where we get salary. For centuries, popular legend claimed Roman soldiers were literally paid in salt. That's not quite true, and we'll come back to that. For now, remember this. Once one empire discovered that controlling salt meant controlling wealth, it was only a matter of time before others followed, and started fighting over who got to control it. Deep in the Sahara, there's a mineral deposit that, for centuries, was worth its exact weight in gold. Starting around the 8th century and continuing for nearly 800 years, massive caravans, sometimes made up of 10,000 camels, set out across the desert from salt mines like Tagaza and Tadeni. Their destination, the legendary trading city of Timbuktu. The journey took anywhere from 40 to 70 days, through some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth. Heat by day, freezing cold by night, no guarantee of water. And at the end of it, merchants would trade their salt slabs directly for gold, sometimes matching them pound for pound. Think about what that actually means. A block of a mineral you could scoop off the ground with a shovel, worth the same as a block of one of the rarest metals on the planet. That trade didn't just move goods. It built kingdoms. The wealth generated by Saharan salt helped finance the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire, and the Almoravid dynasty, turning Timbuktu into one of the great trading and intellectual centers of the medieval world. Salt built fortunes in the desert. But once it crossed the sea, a different kind of empire was about to take control of it entirely. Venice never had rich salt mines of its own. What it had instead was ships and ambition. Between the years 1000 and 1400, Venice methodically built a monopoly over salt trade across the entire Mediterranean. In 1281, the city's Greater Council passed a decree requiring every merchant vessel to carry salt as ballast on its return voyages, turning ordinary cargo runs into a city-wide salt trading operation. Venice didn't just sell salt. It controlled who else got to sell it, charging neighboring cities steep prices and using the profits to fund its famous shipbuilding yards, its banking system, and its rise as a Mediterranean superpower. Salt, it turned out, didn't require an emperor's decree to become a weapon. Sometimes all it took was owning the ships that carried it. But before we go further into how salt divided nations, there's a myth we need to clear up. You've probably heard this one: Roman soldiers were paid in salt. It's one of the most repeated facts about salt history, and it's not actually true. Historians have looked for Roman payroll records showing soldiers receiving salt as wages, and they simply don't exist. What Roman writers like Pliny the Elder actually described was a salarium, most likely a monetary allowance specifically meant to help soldiers buy salt alongside their regular pay. So the popular version of the story is a myth. But here's the thing, the real version might be even more telling. Rome didn't need to pay soldiers in literal salt for salt to matter. They built an entire allowance system around it. That's how essential this mineral was, even to an empire with access to gold, silver, and conquered treasuries from across the known world. If salt could shape military pay in ancient Rome and fund armies in Han China and build kingdoms in the Sahara, you can probably guess what came next. Someone was going to use it to squeeze the people who had no choice but to pay. In France, it was called the gabelle, a salt tax that touched nearly every household in the kingdom. Salt wasn't optional. Everyone needed it, which made it one of the easiest things in the world to tax, and one of the most hated. The gabelle became a symbol of everything people resented about royal power: arbitrary, inescapable, and impossible to avoid. By 1789, that resentment had become one of the many pressures feeding into the French Revolution. But nowhere was the injustice more direct than in British India. In 1882, the British colonial government passed the Salt Act. Indians were now legally required to buy salt from British sources and pay a tax on it. Making your own salt, even scooping it from the ground where the ocean had left it behind for free, was against the law. Sit with that for a moment. An entire nation, standing beside an ocean full of salt, forbidden by law from touching it. For nearly 50 years, that law stood. Then, in 1930, one man decided to walk to the sea and break it in front of the entire world. On March 12, 1930, Mahatma Gandhi set out from the Sabarmati ashram with a small group of followers. Their destination was a coastal village called Dandi, 240 miles away. They walked for 24 days. No weapons, no army, just a growing column of people walking toward the sea, while the entire world began to pay attention. When they reached the shore on April 6th, Gandhi bent down and picked up a small lump of natural sea salt lying on the beach. That was the entire act. No violence. No confrontation. Just an old man in sandals, picking up salt that had washed up naturally on his own country's coastline, and by doing so, deliberately breaking British law in front of thousands of witnesses and international press. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but it was exactly the point. The British Empire had built a law around controlling something as basic as salt, and Gandhi exposed the absurdity of that control with the simplest possible gesture. Within weeks, similar acts of salt-making civil disobedience spread across the country. It became the opening act of a much larger movement, one that would eventually help lead India to independence. Salt had built empires for 2,000 years. In 1930, on a beach in Gujarat, it helped begin the unraveling of one. So what happened to salt after the age of empires? In the 20th century, refrigeration changed everything. Suddenly, you didn't need to pack meat in salt to keep it from spoiling through winter. Salt's oldest job, preserving food, started fading into the background. But salt didn't disappear, transformed. Today, salt is a raw ingredient in over 10,000 different industrial processes, from the chlorine in your drinking water, to the glass in your windows, to pharmaceuticals, to the de-icing trucks that clear the roads after a snowstorm. The mineral that once funded emperors now quietly runs behind the scenes of modern civilization, doing its job so invisibly that almost nobody thinks about it at all. Which, in a strange way, brings us right back to where we started. A hand, shaking salt onto food. Except now you know what that gesture actually contains. Millions of years of ancient seas evaporating into crystal. Stone Age families boiling brine by hand. An emperor funding the Great Wall with a monopoly. Camel caravans crossing the Sahara for salt worth its weight in gold. A tax that helped ignite a revolution. A law that outlawed touching the ocean. And a man who broke that law by simply bending down. The next time you reach for the salt, you're not just seasoning your food. You're touching a piece of nearly every empire in human history. Sitting quietly, waiting, in a shaker on your table. History has a way of hiding its greatest surprises in the most ordinary places, and there are countless more waiting to be uncovered. If this journey sparked your curiosity, consider leaving a like, sharing this story with someone who loves history or food, and telling us in the comments which culinary mystery we should explore next. And if you'd like to travel deeper into the forgotten history behind the foods we eat every day, we'd be honored to have you subscribe and join us for the next chapter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next story.